Good evening, my friends. I hope you're having the best of days so far. So I've got a little story for you today, and I've got to be careful with this story because it may just get me blacklisted, arrested on site in the city of London for fraudulent behaviour. So I've got to be very careful when telling you this story. So for a little bit of context, I'm 22 years of age. I've got a younger brother who's 19, and we have a very good relationship. We're very close. You know, he doesn't live with us in the family home at the moment, but whenever he's back in town, we like to have these big days out together, where we try to prove that you can have some of the best days of your life without spending any money. So on one of these days, we decided we were going to travel down to London and just hit up some of the fanciest spots in the entire city. The 5-star hotels, the banking institutions, the cigar lounges, the places where the wealthy and elite go to congregate. But that's just the thing. We weren't just trying to blend in that day, because think about it. We don't come from old money. We don't really come from a high income family. These places aren't really for people like us. And you know, we got in there, but getting in there's one thing. If we were to leave, I'm not entirely sure we would make it back in. You know, whilst we were there, we were trying to make the most of it. We were trying to do some daring shit. We're trying to challenge ourselves. We're telling people that we're young CEOs, that we're investment bankers, that we work in wealth and asset management. We've effectively invented these characters in our heads. And then we're doing things like walking into the jewelry store, pretending that we're really wealthy, that we've got a lot of money, and asking to try on the most expensive timepiece in the entire store. Or we're trying to bullshit our way into the premium rooftop bar on the 5-star hotel, the places where they have someone checking the guest list. And get this, these people are buying it. They're believing this stuff that me and my brother are just making up on the spot. We're walking into the lobby of a skyscraper and saying that we're there on behalf of $100 million company who wants to purchase some office space in the skyscraper. And these people are taking us deadly serious. They're calling down the manager to come and shake our hands and like negotiate some kind of business deal. Meanwhile, I'm looking back at my brother and he can barely keep a straight face, like we cannot believe this situation that we're in. And as we're traveling home from one of the most fun days of my entire life, despite acting like a menace to society, it hits me. About 4 years ago, I wouldn't have even have left the house. Because as a self-described introvert, as someone who struggled with social anxiety throughout my entire younger years, throughout all of school, I couldn't imagine being that deep into a lie. My body would be shutting down. I'd be turning red. I'd be sweating bullets. And that wouldn't have even have happened to me from doing anything that daring. That type of thing would happen every time I met a new person. And I'd want them to like me. I'd want to make a good impression. But I'd just be so stuck in my own head. I'd be hyper-fixating on what they were thinking of me. And as a result, my body just freeze up. I couldn't get my words out. Or in group conversations, I was the type of person who, anytime I wanted to contribute to the discussion, I'd just get talked over. And then it would be that little awkward thing where you have to pretend that you didn't say anything. Then a couple of years later, I'm in London and I'm delivering business pitches for businesses that I don't even have. Now, obviously that day out in London is quite an extreme example. And I probably sound like a bit of a dick, you know, going around wasting people's time. But until that day, I don't think I realised just how far a bit of confidence can take you. Being an introvert is not something that has to hold you back in social situations or stop you from being confident. You and your abilities are not set in stone. You can be whatever you want. You can be the type of individual who prefers your own company for the most part, but still be the most confident guy in the room at any given time. So here's a few things I want to tell you, introvert to introvert. So I have a particular mindset shift that I want to discuss with you today. One that when I embraced, took me out of my crusty ass bedroom, off the video games, out of that toxic friend group where I couldn't even stand up for myself, where I didn't really have any other options socially, and took me into a world of social possibilities, chilling with all different types of people, going to parties, hooking up the girls. You know, maybe that's not your thing, but it's nice to have the option. And where it really helped me was also in forming those incredible connections with like-minded guys, with driven, ambitious guys, future millionaires in the making, people that you can sit down and have high-level conversations with. And because of this mental reframe, I started seeing so many new doors opening up around me. Doors that would have been like locked and bolted to that past version of me. Whether it was like ways of making money, the types of friends I could have, or really just the way that I see and interact with the world. There's a certain subsection of people out there who may or may not be watching this video, who this is going to annoy, who instead of embracing new ideas, instead of trying to learn as much as they can about the world to better themselves, who want to stay in the same place, who are going to cling to comfort at every opportunity, who are going to find every excuse they can not to change, even though they can't look at themselves in the mirror because they know they could be doing better. And I know you're not one of those people. Do you know how I know that? Because you've stayed for this long. I know you're at least willing to entertain someone else's perspective. And I only ask that you keep an open mind throughout all of this. Now, I don't really believe in introverts or extroverts. I know that sounds a little bit crazy. Maybe science or logic says otherwise. But I don't tend to believe in things that don't directly enhance my life. Like, obviously, that sounds a little bit ridiculous. It doesn't mean I'm going to wake up one day and just jump off a building because I don't believe in the laws of physics anymore or whatever the fuck. I'm more talking about the limitations that I put upon myself, the things that I tell myself I can or can't do. And in this case, I believe that calling yourself an introvert comes with a certain set of limitations. So if you look up the textbook definition of the word introvert, a shy and reticent person. I didn't actually know what the word reticent meant before making this video, but supposedly reticent means someone who is extremely quiet. That was the perfect definition people would have used to describe me. From the ages of about 5 to 18, everyone would have described me that way, and no one believed it more than myself. I would go to family gatherings or weddings or birthday parties, whatever, and I wouldn't say a word to anyone. I would just stare down at the floor and cling to my mum's side, pretend everyone else wasn't there. And whenever anyone questioned that, my mother would step in for me. She'd say, "Oh, he's just shy." And I'd just be like staring at the floor and nodding my head in agreement. And that was only until I was like 14, because after that I got my first smartphone, and then I'd just go and find like a quiet corner to occupy, to go on my phone. And I wouldn't even like be on any apps at all. I'd just be like messing around in the settings, changing the wallpaper, or like listening to 2 Eminem songs that I had downloaded. And sure, sometimes it felt embarrassing that my family had to make excuses for me about why I wouldn't talk to anyone. And on the way there, you know, like the car journey, I'd be visualizing in my head a version of me that went around the room talking to everyone, maybe risen up the girls. But then as soon as I'd step into that room, my social anxiety would go through the roof. And more times than not, the same excuse that my mum made for me would be going through my head. It's okay, I'm just shy. And honestly, it was only in safe, enclosed spaces, or like with my family or my little group of friends at school, or even on my own, that I truly felt comfortable opening up to the world, showing off my personality, which was actually quite energetic and lively. And I know that is a defining trait of introverts. They're more energized by their own company or with people that they're comfortable with. And I still almost describe myself like that today. But what I want you to know and understand is that I was very defined by this word, shy, introvert. I believed that was who I was, through and through. And that's a very dangerous thing. So a lot of people don't realize, but the words you use to describe yourself can actually hold a lot of power over you. Those words can often be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They can send you down a good path, or they can send you down a very dark one. So I'm going to assume you've heard of the practice of affirmations, where you're repeating like certain statements over and over in your head again to reinforce a certain type of thinking. For instance, if I have like a presentation coming up, I'm going to be repeating, "I'm confident, I'm that guy," to kind of reinforce that type of thinking. You're doing reps for your mind. You're really trying to reprogram your thought patterns. So when it comes to the real thing, you've deluded yourself to the point where like you're just acting in line with your thoughts. You're exuding real, authentic, confident energy. And this is not bullshit. This is as simple as positive thoughts lead to positive outcomes. And I'm sure you probably know where I'm going with this, but it also works in the opposite way. When you're repeating a negative, limiting description of yourself over and over again in your head, it almost always leads to a negative outcome. And through telling myself over and over again in my head that I'm an introvert, I put myself in a certain category. I said, I'm never going to be the type of person who's charismatic, who has a lot of friends, or does something like public speaking. Literally anything requiring self-confidence and for me to put myself out there, I just ruled out for myself. And I want to make something clear. I'm not intending to shit on introverts by saying any of this. That's not a label that I would use to describe myself anymore, but I understand the need to be on your own sometimes. Like after I broke up with my ex-girlfriend, I literally didn't talk to anyone for about 6 weeks, and that shit was addicting. And it's also fine to not always want to be the center of attention. Like, you know those people who you meet who they just demand that everyone's always looking at them or listening to them? They're annoying. They're some of the most off-putting people you can meet. But an unfortunate truth is that we're living in a world which is heavily biased against introverts and towards extroverts. Like, to give you an example, what are the common traits of the traditional extrovert? Sociable, outgoing, assertive, All traits that people are going to be looking for in potential friends or employees. You generally see more extroverts as CEOs or in higher positions at work. And my theory for that is that extroverts are probably more likely to speak up in meetings or like make those important connections, just move up the ladder faster, versus the introvert guy who could still be like a very high performer, but he doesn't take credit for the work as much. And there's also a proven bias when it comes to job interviews. Like, you can go and look this up now. They've done the studies. Introverts usually get passed over when it comes to jobs in favor of extroverts. And that's normally because of the first impression. It's fucked up, but if you were to openly admit to your interviewer that you're someone who's more on the introverted side, they're probably going to be ruling you out, even without them themselves realizing it. They're doing it subconsciously because we have that deep-rooted belief inside of us that introvert means worse communicator. And listen, that's a truth that I had to wrestle with for years before I finally accepted it. I was that kid who the teacher was always like forgetting the name of. I was always getting talked over in group conversation. I just felt pretty invisible for years. And I did cry over it. I did complain to everyone about how unfair it was. But eventually I got over it. I stopped being a little bitch and I did something. What I did was I changed my worldview to one that suited me, to one that allowed me to thrive rather than putting me at a disadvantage. And I'm going to tell you exactly how I did that. I think one of the most important skills that anyone can develop is the ability to question your own beliefs. And you're already doing that to an extent by watching this video. You're considering my perspective. You're evaluating that against whatever evidence you have. And then you're weighing it up against like whatever your current belief is. And whether or not you agree with me or not is a different story. That's entirely up to you. But at least you're going to have more clarity about why you hold that particular viewpoint. And your beliefs actually have a massive influence over your actions. For instance, the belief that I was an introvert probably stopped me from like going and signing up to the school debate team or whatever, because introverts don't get up on stage and talk in front of other people. But after I'd been beaten down by life so much and I'd had enough of not having any real close friends, not having a girlfriend, not having any money, of being bullied, for being shy and awkward, I sat down just totally alone with my thoughts one day and I'd started to question, where did that belief come from? When did I become an introvert? So I put a pen to paper, started writing, and eventually I got to one of my earliest memories that I can remember, which was my dad dropping me off at school on my first day. So picture me at 4 years old, totally carefree, living a sick life, get to watch TV and just play with toys all day. And suddenly I can't do that anymore. I have to leave the comfort and security of my own home. I'm being forced to just sit still in one room all day. I have to wear the same itchy, uncomfortable uniform as everyone else. I'm not allowed to see my family, and I only get 1 hour at lunchtime for exercise. Sounds a hell of a lot like jail. But yeah, my dad drops me off at school and I'm the first kid in the entire class to arrive. Things are actually going pretty well, all things considered. I'm meeting my teachers, they seem nice. But then my dad tells me he has to go and I just flip my shit. I start freaking out. I don't want him to leave me there. So I start running after him. I run out of the classroom. I'm just chasing my dad down. But my teaching assistant, who's built like a sumo wrestler, intercepts me. She fucking tackles me. She's restraining me. She's holding me back. And I'm just absolutely crying my eyes out. And I look at my dad and I see him hesitate for a moment and then he leaves. And I still remember just like the pain, the feeling of abandonment that I felt in that moment. So I'm back in the classroom and I just go to the nearest corner I can find and plant myself there. I'm not moving, I'm not doing anything, I'm just staring at the wall. And the day goes on, the other kids arrive, the teacher starts the lesson, but I'm not moving out that corner. I'm not trying to make friends with any of these other kids. I'm still in my feelings over my dad abandoning me. And I keep up that act for a couple of days, but eventually I get over it. I join the rest of the kids, I start making friends, and things go well from there. But that one experience was enough for my teachers to flag me as a bad kid. This is an antisocial kid. We need to keep an eye on him. But I promise I'm getting to the point here. As the days and the weeks go by, these teachers keep on observing me like I'm a little bad kid. They see me, call me out on things like daydreaming and not putting up my hand enough. I'm on my own, like drawing away from the other kids. And they're taking note of all of this. They've decided I'm a certain way. And I can tell you with certainty that even though I was well behaved up from that point, these teachers never stopped seeing me that way. And I know that because they never treated me any different the next 7 years. In all of the fucking school plays, the Christmas production, they'd give me the non-speaking parts. They'd make me be like the fucking non-speaking Christmas tree. Do you want to know when I believe I became an introvert? It was when that first parents' evening rolled around. Like, you know, the evening where the parents come in to chat to the teachers. When asked how I was doing, my teachers replied with, "Oh, he's shy. He's a rather quiet young man." And when my parents came home and shared that with me, at that age when my brain is still like forming and I'm still trying to figure out the world for what it is, what choice did I have but to accept that description of me, to internalize it, to become it? And whether that was like the true origin of me being an introvert, I don't know. I think in actuality it was probably that and lots of other comparable experiences that shaped me. But all I know is through years of conditioning, through years of those negative affirmations of me telling myself I was quiet, I became so reserved that I didn't believe I could be any other way. I didn't think that was something that I could change. But I could. Through going through my history, through making pages and pages of notes about my childhood experiences, which is a practice that I recommend you do, I actually identified at least one moment, that parents' evening, where that label of introvert, of shy, was attached to me by someone else. At least one small moment that had a very big impact on my future. But realizing that this belief that I'd held onto for so many years wasn't actually my own, that I wasn't just an introvert, I wasn't born that way. This is actually someone else's empty description of me. That led me to the conclusion that introverts and extroverts, they're not personality types, they're fucking labels, they're illusions, they're not set in stone. And that changed my worldview permanently. A lot of what I accepted as introversy was actually just social anxiety, which is a different problem in itself, but a problem that can be solved, that millions of people do actually go on to solve, rather than it being something you're born with and can't change. I think if introversy and extroversy do exist, it's not binary, it's not one extreme or the other. It's a spectrum. It's like one day you can be outgoing and social, and the next day you can be perfectly happy in your own company. Point is, you should have the ability to choose to be able to do both. I will not call myself an introvert or an extrovert because the truth is I'm none of those things. I'm nothing and I'm everything. And I get that sounds a little bit pretentious, but the truth is I'm whatever I decide I am. It's like Bruce Lee said. Bruce Lee said, be like water. Water does not have one form. It's not rigid. It's not an ice cube. Water changes its shape to fit whatever container it's in. You don't just have one form. You can be whatever the situation demands of you. Not always wanting to be the center of attention doesn't necessarily make you an introvert. You should be able to step into that role if you need to, or say you want to challenge yourself. You don't always have to. Think of someone like Keanu Reeves. He probably does one of the most extroverted jobs in the entire world. His movies are seen by like millions of people every single year. But in his private life, he keeps to himself. He doesn't really like all the fame and attention. You can be a great charismatic leader. You can command people's attention. And you can also recognize when it's best to just stay silent, to listen, to observe things that other people aren't going to pick up on. And when I realized this, my life just improved tenfold. I stopped making excuses. Social skills became the absolute priority. And for the first time in my life, I was actually following my fear. It's like anytime the idea of going to meet some new people or like going to chill with a new group made me feel uncomfortable or stressed out, I thought, fuck it, I'm scared for a reason and I can learn through that fear. And that's how I ended up doing all this wild shit in London. It's because most of the time I was scared to do it and I did it anyway. And with all that said, I don't want you to think I'm perfect because I'm not perfect. I can walk into a building lobby like I'm James Bond, but I'll still watch like 100 cold approach videos instead of actually going and talking to some pretty girls. And if you're struggling with social skills, bro, I want you to know that I made an amazing video on overcoming social awkwardness and never running out of things to say in conversation. I highly recommend that you go and watch that now. So that's all from me today, bro. Take care.